Hello and welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast, a podcast that aims to inspire, engage and connect social workers with other social workers and allied health professionals doing interesting and amazing things across the world. I'm your host, Marie Vakakis. Thank you for listening and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. To another episode of the Inside Social Work podcast. It's winter and it is a crisp start to the season, that's for sure. I hope everybody is keeping warm and rugged up. And my thoughts go out to people across the country. We've had some really extreme weather conditions and it's incredibly difficult for those in flood affected areas and experiencing wild winds and storms and a range of different natural phenomenons or natural disasters really. So it's been a very difficult time for a number of people out there, and there's some incredible social workers doing frontline crisis work, trauma work, recovery work, volunteering with their CFAs and other sorts of emergency services. So we thank you all for what you're doing. In today's episode, I chat with Adham Hammoud, and Adham works in tertiary mental health services. He's worked as a case manager. And part of his role now is in education, in supporting graduate social workers and other allied health professionals, as well as students on placement. So I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Adham shares a bit about his journey into social work and into mental health social work, and some of the things that he can suggest you do to have a really successful student placement, or if you're a graduate and you're looking to get into the mental health space. Here's my interview with Adham. Welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast. I'm here with Adham Hammoud. Welcome, Adham.
Thanks, Marie. It's nice to be here.
Do you want to let the listeners know a little bit about your social work journey? So you're an accredited mental health social worker now, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
How did it all start out? What got you into social work?
It's an interesting question because it's a question that a lot of my family and friends don't really work in the same field as me. So I do get asked that question a lot. And, it's interesting because I don't really know how I got into it. It just felt right for me.
Yeah.
I always knew that I wanted to work with people in a helping profession, but it was quite interesting for me because I always thought of myself as quite introverted, and the idea of working with people was a bit anxiety provoking at first, but I knew it was something that suited my personality, because I do like to help people. And yeah, I was thinking about what types of, in high school, what types of jobs I could do. And I just aligned with social work the most, to be honest. I didn't really know much about it, but I knew a little bit. So I did, research online about what it entailed. And yeah, I thought, you know what, this sounds like me. And yeah, I think I've made the right decision. I constantly think about my career and the directions that it could have gone into. And I think I keep coming back to social work, which is a good sign.
It is. Did you start off, so that was your first degree off year 12?
Yeah. So I studied at La Trobe University in Bandura. I did the double degree. So I did a Bachelor of Human Services and a Master of Social Work. So that was quite lovely. Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed that course. So I graduated in 2012. That's when I finished. My first placement was in community mental health in an NGO. So that was quite lovely. And my second final placement was in a hospital in oncology and just the general acute medical wards. So so that was quite nice as well. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now you're in mental health in both a sort of a therapeutic role and also an educator and case management split role. What's been the journey to this point? Like, how did you end up in mental health as being the area you like to focus on?
Yeah, it's been a long journey, to be honest, because when I was nearing the end of my degree, I was quite fortunate because the organization where I was doing my placement had a graduate vacancy there in the rehabilitation area. So I applied for it. And I got it. So that was quite nice. That was a really good experience, to be honest. I stayed there for nearly 3 years. Um, and in hindsight, I don't know if, I mean, I don't regret it at all. Like, I really enjoyed working there, and it was the perfect grounding for me because I was exposed to pretty much everything. Um, um, in terms of discharge planning, psychosocial assessments, therapeutic interventions, disability, aged care, medical issues, strokes, ABIs, palliative care, family violence, child protection. This was pre-NDIS as well, so which was quite challenging because the disability sector was quite severely underfunded in those days. So it was quite sad as well because we would have lots of under like young adults who had severe disabilities and they weren't really able to get much support. Yeah, so and it was a lot of complex discharge planning and problem solving in terms of trying to avoid young people going into nursing homes, which wasn't easy pre-NDIS. Yeah, so it was quite, it was really good experiences. We, achieved amazing things with people, lots of counseling, lots of adjustment to illness, disability, grief and loss, not just bereavement per se, but loss of function, loss of independence, loss of identity. Yeah, and there was mental health throughout that as well, but it wasn't the bread and butter. Lots of family work, family meetings, VCAT. So it's a good. You get everything in hospital. You get a taste of everything, but throughout that time, I always had a desire to experience working in a mental health setting, like in an exclusive mental health setting. So after 2.5 years of working in my first job, I was thinking, I've really enjoyed this experience, but I want to experience mental health. I don't want to necessarily get pigeonholed into one area, especially this early in my career. So I started looking for mental health positions. But surprisingly, I was getting a lot of rejection, which was really disheartening at the time. I guess I was in a very awkward phase where I was quote unquote too experienced for graduate roles at that point. But on the other side of the spectrum, I didn't have enough clinical mental health experience where I could get a clinician job in mental health. So I was in that range where I wasn't really fitting. And it was quite tricky because I applied for lots of mental health jobs. But yeah, not much success. So then I thought, maybe it's not for me. And I'm already enjoying what I'm doing. There's nothing wrong with it. So maybe I should stay in the hospital. So that's what I did. I got another position at another hospital, like a grade 2 position, which was, again, it was amazing. I worked a lot with stroke, neurology, rehab. And then in this position, it was really cool because I got to work with people in the acute stages of their illness. So when they had just had the stroke, but then I got to follow them once they went to rehab and once they got discharged. So I followed that whole journey. But then, after like nearly 3 years of that, I had the inkling again of it's not going away. Like I really, because in the hospital, you do get a lot of, from time to time, clients who have mental health issues, like clinical mental health, schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, anxiety, PTSD. And then I thought, oh, let's try again. And yeah, I discovered this organization, which was amazing. And yeah, they took a chance on me. So that was like nearly 5 years ago. And I haven't turned back since. So yeah, so in that new organization, like public mental health, I got a position as a recovery clinician, so a mental health clinician providing case management. And then, yeah, a year later, I got promoted. I became a senior clinician there. And they were very good to me. I was given lots of great opportunities. I had a few stints as, acting team leader, did a bit of stints as acting manager. And about a year ago, or just over a year ago, actually, last month was the 1 year anniversary. I did a secondment as the allied health educator. And I also, was successful in getting a position as the social work discipline lead. So yeah, so my current position is allied health educator and social work discipline lead. Which is, it's been just over a year, and my contract just got extended for another year, so that's quite nice.
That's exciting.
So I'm really loving it. Yeah.
I really,
and then about 8 months ago, I got accredited. So I applied for accreditation as an accredited mental health social worker, which was another massive step for me. And yeah, since then, I've been doing a bit of private work on the side as well, as an accredited mental health social worker providing counselling. Yeah, so I'm quite fortunate at the moment, to be honest, because I've got a lot of variety with what I'm doing, and I'm getting a bit of a taste of everything, which I think is quite nice.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I chose social work, was the ability to move laterally and have so much variety. I do want to ask you a little bit about your educator role, but the social work lead bit really interested me. And having worked, I mean, in your experience, having worked in the hospital system under that medical model, how have you advocated for the voice of social work in those roles? Like, how do you kind of see it or navigate that system?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it is true that traditionally speaking, clinical mental health has been quite dominated by medical and nursing, which are definitely very, very important and valuable disciplines. And, we have really good relationships with the medical, psychiatric teams and the mental health nursing teams as well. And with allied health, social work and OT and psychology have been quite in the minority. So I guess in terms of my social work discipline lead role, it's been about representing, because it is a leadership position, and it's quite a privilege to do it, because I do get to represent social work within the leadership space. So it's nice to have social work at the table for these important, meetings and conversations. And I guess in terms of advocacy, I think the very fact that I'm at these meetings and at these tables has been really good, because I've been able to promote the discipline a bit more. And I actually haven't felt like it has been a lot of advocacy. It's just been a lot of promotion, really, because there are some who don't realize the full scope of the social work profession, and they have an idea of social work being quite pigeonholed to do particular things. So yeah, so with me, there's been a lot of promotion about the full scope. Last year I did a big piece of work that I shared with the leadership team about role clarity and what social workers can do. Because a lot of people view social workers as just providing the welfare type interventions, which are definitely very important, but they don't realize that there is a huge therapeutic background in how we're trained and how we study and what we do, as well as the education component and the statutory component as well. So so it's definitely welfare, it's definitely therapeutic, it's definitely education, statutory. We can work in any setting: inpatient, rehabilitation, residential, community, crisis, leadership, management, projects, quality, research, policy, anything. Yeah, so it's just been around promotion and just showing people that, we are capable of this, and not necessarily stepping on other people's toes, because there's room for everyone. It's just because I'm promoting one discipline, it doesn't mean that I'm speaking lesser towards another. Like, there's room for all of us. Mental health is so understaffed and under-resourced, and it's just showing that we can all work together. And it doesn't mean that if I'm promoting social work, then another discipline needs to miss out on anything, because there's room for all of us.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you what are some of those roles, but you've just reeled them all off, which really shows the diversity of social work. It's all those areas you mentioned and so much more.
Yeah, and definitely. And, in this organization where I work, it's quite lovely because we do have, and it is true that in terms of clinical mental health, the social work profession is the largest allied health discipline out of all the allied health disciplines. And we do have a presence everywhere in, the inpatient units, in management, in leadership, in projects, we have family therapy positions. So we've got social workers everywhere, which is quite nice, especially for students who come to have placements with us, to see that, you don't have to just do one thing. Like, the world is pretty much your oyster. It's important to get a foundation in your training, but once you have that foundation, you can just do anything, really.
Yeah, that it's a really nice segue into that educator role. And it's something a lot of the students that contact me, or listeners of the podcast contact me to ask about. And some of the students I've worked with as well, of sometimes there's this fear of, I don't know what I want to specialize in, or what other study do I need to do. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. But also I tell them, get the job first. And some of this will come up with experience. Like, you might realize you're really interested in one area, or some of them do overlap, and some roles can include a lot more than maybe what's advertised. So there might be like a working group or a special project. There's always ways to incorporate a bit of your interests, whether that be in your personal life. Like, you could be into gardening and bring gardening into an inpatient unit. Like, there's so many ways to customize roles and build up those skills. But what do you notice in your context as a allied health educator, and how our students are managing those questions about what to do?
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like, in terms of students, because in my educator role, I wear a lot of hats, and I work with grads and postgrads and students. And in terms of students, I work a lot with social work students, but I also work a lot with occupational therapy students, music therapy, art therapy, and a little bit of nursing as well. Although we do have one of my colleagues, my nursing counterpart, does coordinate the nursing student program, but I coordinate all the other disciplines. And I feel like out of all the disciplines, the social work students tend to be more interested in mental health and compared to others. We get lots of nursing students who aren't really that interested in mental health, but it's part of their course where they have to do at least one placement. And it's quite obvious, not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them aren't that keen. And I think it's more to do with like a bit of a fear factor. Whereas with social work, a lot of students are really interested in mental health and they really want to at least experience it just to get a bit of a taste. And it depends on where a student is at, because if it's their first placement or their second placement, if it's their first placement, they might be interested in mental health just to explore it, but they might not be convinced that that's what they want to do. I have a few social work students at the moment. One of them is really interested in mental health and is really interested in family violence and child protection, and isn't sure what she wants to do. But I keep telling her, look, it's still very early days. You don't need to decide. But what we've been able to do, which I think is really amazing for her, because even though on paper, her placement is officially mental health. But what we've been able to do is connect her with our family violence specialist advisor who works in our organization and spend a few days a week with her. So she's getting a lot of experience in mental health. She's also getting a lot of experience in family violence. And particularly, she's getting a lot of experience in how family violence intersects with mental health, because we do get a lot of clients with mental health issues who are victims of family violence, but we also get a lot of clients who are perpetrators as well. So she's really loving her placement because she's getting the best of both worlds, which is good for her resume, and it's good for when she does eventually graduate, because she'll be able to sell herself as someone who's got experience in both fields.
That's so interesting, and I think I really like that you pointed out the intersectionality, because even in those jobs you mentioned you had originally, they all intersect with mental health, because we all have mental health. So we're always going to at some point have good or bad or somewhere in the middle. And the family violence, we know the impact of trauma on not just PTSD but anxiety, depression, any mental illness really.
Exactly.
Can be caused or triggered by trauma. It made me think, and it's a little bit just a side note to what we've been talking about, is how do you recommend that students make the most out of placement? So you had this student who, how did they express this desire, or how did they even customize their placement to get the most out of it? Like what advice would you give to students listening now who are maybe adjusting to being on placement? Because at uni, you're prescribed learning, you're prescribed assignments, and then you go on to placement, and workers expect you to come to them and say, this is what I need, or this is what I want. But that it's really hard to take that hat off as the passive learner and be more active. So how would you encourage students to make the most out of placement and be more active in that learning environment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that I talk a lot with the students about, because it's easier said than done, but I do tell them, don't be shy. It's because sometimes we get students that keep a low profile. And I work in a massive organization, and the teams are quite big. There's heaps of workers. It's a multidisciplinary team. So we have social workers, we have OTs, psychologists, mental health nurses, peer support workers, carer consultant, consumer consultant, doctors, psychiatrists. It's a massive team, and everyone is busy, but in a good way. Like, there's nothing wrong with being busy. It's good to be busy. And the reason why I say that is everyone, from morning till the end of the day gets on with their work. And the workers might be doing really interesting things that the student could tag along and observe and shadow. So what I tell students is, you will be allocated your field educator, supervisor, but you don't have to be stuck to their hip. You don't need to stay with them all the time. If you overhear a phone call and you of another worker, and it sounds like they're doing something interesting, like they might be doing a family meeting or a home visit or a tribunal hearing, or they might be visiting the inpatient unit because one of their clients is currently admitted, or they might be taking someone to a rehab facility to tour the facility to see if it's something they're interested in. Just go up to them and ask them if you can tag along. 95% of the time they'll say yes. And the 5% of the time is not because they don't want you, it's because maybe the client, it's not suitable for whatever reason. So don't be shy. Look at, make contact with the other people in your team. Ask if you can tag along. If someone has a long to-do list, just volunteer to help them out. That you don't need to be doing any grand. I literally just had this conversation last week with one of the students. We had our mid-placement liaison visit with the university, and we were saying, in this field that we work in, it is clinical mental health, and we're dealing with the extreme end of cases where there's a lot of risk involved in terms of suicide, self-harm, violence, aggression, neglect, vulnerability. So it's hard to allow students to just carry an independent caseload because there are quite large risk implications, but we definitely give students opportunities to lead sessions, but with supervision. So that's definitely a good idea once you get over your orientation period to work towards something like that. But there are lots of interventions that you can do that will give you training. Lots of liaison with external services, GPs, contacting people, making referrals, doing welfare checks, providing assistance with accessing NDIS. So there are lots of tasks that you can do which will equip you with really good transferable skills. And that's what I always tell social workers, not just students, but even when they've graduated, because the thing about studying social work is it's sort of like you get a foundational training in a bit of everything, but you don't feel like an expert in anything.
Yeah, it's so true.
But that's good because, you do get equipped with really good transferable generalist skills that you can apply in any field. And then once you start working in any given field, there's a lot of on-the-job learning that you'll learn as well. So don't minimize what you know already because you know more than what you think you know. You just don't know it yet because you haven't had to use it. Yeah.
That's so lovely, and really good advice for those listening who are either studying or graduates in new roles. One thing I always ask, I try and always ask the guests is, what are the things that you've done to balance all of this? So you just mentioned, especially the risk profile of the clients that you work with. How do you keep yourself engaged in work and your well-being a priority? Like what are the things that you find helpful to keep you from burning out and leaving that role?
Yeah. It is really important because not just mental health, but many fields of social work, the work can be quite relentless. And, we do it because we love it, but too much of anything can get a bit much. So it's really important to have a good work-life balance. When 5 p.m. hits, just go home. Don't worry about staying back. Don't worry about finishing off something, because realistically, the work will never end. Like, even if you stay at work 24/7, the work will always be there. It'll never end, because once you do something, there's a new job. So it's just nonstop.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind when you're staying back, just to finish off something, because really it's going to be there tomorrow. Just do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, take advantage of the team as well. If you're in a position where you have to make a clinical decision and you're not quite sure, you're feeling a bit nervous, or you want to, brainstorm, problem solve with someone, just ask. There's always, senior clinicians on the team. There's always, your team leader, your manager, your supervisor. And even if someone isn't technically in a senior position, but you have really experienced people that you can talk to for advice. And, everywhere I've worked, there's been really good camaraderie, because I think there's a sense of, you look out for each other, because the work can be quite challenging at times. But don't feel like you have to carry a decision on your own. We really love it when people ask us for advice, or just to make sure they're on the right track, because it's better to be double sure than just to sit with something on your own, because that's when you'll go home with anxiety. Even if your manager is off or your team leader is off, most mental health services have an after hours coordinator or a manager on call. So just make the most of that. They're more than happy to just support you. You just have to ask. I think your leave is really important. So a lot of people get in the not habit, but they might take annual leave once a year, which is good, but that's 11 months of working straight. So it's a good idea to just spread out a bit of annual leave throughout the year. Take regular breaks. They don't need to be long. They can just be a few days a week. Just at least you've got something to look forward to. Don't lose contact with your friends, with your family, because I know when we start working full time, it's a big adjustment to go from uni to full-time work. It's quite mentally draining, especially that transition. Even if you're tired, just book a dinner, go visit someone, do nice things in your own time. Don't just go home and sleep, because then your life will become quite monotonous and quite boring, and just work, sleep. It's not great. So just do things that you like to do, exercise, go for hikes, go for walks, go to dinners, spend time with family, friends, your partners. Do the nice things. Work will always be there. The work will never go away. Prioritize your personal life. Yeah.
Beautiful. Some really great tips. So around setting boundaries of your work hours, that camaraderie and peer support. And I think that's really valuable, because a lot of people, will talk about supervision, and that's one component. Everyone should have some good supervision, but that could be once a month. You've got all this other time in between where, going for a coffee or a tea in the tea room, or even just talking to someone. That peer support's really valuable.
Yeah.
What else were you saying around good sleep hygiene and connecting with friends and family, and not losing sight of the things you enjoy? It's all the great stuff for good mental health.
Exactly. And these are the types of things that I talk to my clients about, you know, like in hindsight and looking as an outsider, it almost feels common sense to talk about these things. But, once you're in the midst of something, you can easily lose track of things and lose perspective. So it's good to just remind yourself that, look, even though you love your job, even though you've studied for it, even though you've worked really hard to get where you are, at the end of the day, it's just a job. It's not your life. So it's good to just focus on your well-being. And that's something that I try to, role model as well. Yeah, lots of I like to, go for runs, go to the gym, play badminton, go for road trips. I'm quite close knit with my family, so I keep in touch with my family quite a lot. Just do nice things like that. They don't need to be grand things. You don't always need to go on a interstate or overseas trip to have a break. You can just have a break at home. Yeah.
Thank you
But
so
but you did mention something which is really good, which is supervision. A lot of people, because we've got clinical supervision and line supervision, and they're two very distinct things. So it's important to make sure that you're getting both, because line supervision is really good to meet with your line manager or team leader, just to make sure that you're on the right track in terms of the actual core business of the job, that you're doing the right things. But clinical supervision is really good for the reflective practice. I always, when I have supervision, I feel quite nourished, because it's where we work, we have our line manager and then we have our clinical supervisor. And that's one of my jobs, actually, as the social work discipline lead, to ensure that every social worker has a supervisor allocated. And we try to make sure that if someone's clinical supervisor is from a completely different team, so it's quite separate from where they're working, which is good because you get an outsider's perspective. And it's not really about the KPIs and the requirements of the job. It's more around, how are you going? How are you feeling? How are you coping? Bringing some cases that someone might be struggling with, a sounding board. So it's quite lovely. So line supervision and clinical supervision, they're really good things to make sure that you're having a bit of both, not just line supervision, because sometimes line supervision can feel a bit awkward, because if it's your team leader or manager, you might feel a bit not comfortable to be too honest with them.
Yeah, it doesn't really, if you think about what the foundations of what supervision is, it doesn't really count as supervision. It's more like caseload management.
Yeah.
If you're talking about supervision in that nourishment way, and to learn, to grow, to explore your own, what's coming up for you, like that's very different. And a lot of people advocate, who speak on the podcast around, if your workplace doesn't provide that, investing some time in setting up a peer supervision group or paying for it externally, so you have that space to really talk about what's coming up for you, and seeing, I think we need to see some of these additional things as necessary tools for the job. So if you're a tradie, you need to upgrade your equipment, you need to buy tools, and supervision and professional development are some of the tools that we need. They're vital to the longevity in the field, to keeping up to date with current best practice and current knowledge, and managing what comes up for you, because we work with humans and things always trigger things from our lives, or we have different perspectives. So I think it's really important what you mentioned, that distinction between line management and clinical supervision.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is. It's really important. You know, I've been quite lucky because ever since I graduated till now, I've always had access to regular clinical supervision. And yeah, you're right. If the organization isn't providing it for whatever reason, it's worth considering private as well, external. It doesn't need to be every month if you know, it can just be once every few months, you know, as long as you're meeting with someone periodically. And it's tax deductible as well, which is good if finances are an issue. Or yeah, just catching up with a group of peers. And that's also really lovely as well. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Adam. It's been really lovely to hear about your journey and to have someone who coordinates placements in a public mental health setting. I think is going to be very interesting for some of our listeners.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. And just quickly, it's an exciting time to work in mental health as well because of the Royal Commission into Mental Health and the recommendations. So it's definitely a good time to consider working in mental health. There's lots of opportunities coming up all the time now. Yeah.
Sure are. Thanks so much.
No worries. See ya.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. The Inside Social Work podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we record this podcast today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you for listening. If you would like to support the podcast, you could leave a rating or a review on iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcast, and feel free to join the Facebook group. It'd be great to hear from you. Have a lovely day. Bye.